Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host again, Jay Hursto. Joining me once again, these guys are becoming a regulars. We have the Mad Dog, Mike Dougherty. Mike, how are you?
Doing fantastic.
Great to hear. And Pete, Oliver-Krueger. Pete, how are you?
I'm also doing fantastic.
That's great. So three of us are all doing fantastic. We're all lying to each other. So let's go in. So the topic of this episode, Mike and Pete have another project. You might remember them from the last interview we did with them and the book they were working on. Now they have another project that they're working on that we really wanted to get them on to talk about, the Library of Agile. And no, it is not a transformation framework. It is not specifically. It says that multiple times. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. And if you were running into me in the elevator, and you said, I'm working on the Library of Agile. And I said, well, Mike, what the hell is that? How would you respond to me?
So the good news about the Library of Agile is you can start pretty small and grow it and scale it from there, getting that very popular word out there. And it's a journey, getting that other very popular word out there. Consider the Library of Agile a way to help you figure out where you are. And sometimes we all run into the case, if you've been doing coaching and running as a scrum master or a leader that's involved in any agile delivery, that failure happens. And I've seen it so many times. I've been involved in a value management office in the past where we had 80 projects we're running at a given time. And out of the 80, there are some that just said, yeah, we're doing safe and less combined, and we have a half-day PI planning. Oh, yeah, that sounds like you're doing it great by the book there. It must be wonderful. How's that turning out? Well, our story points keep going higher and higher. Now we have teams of 30 people with 1,000 story points they're supposed to complete in a sprint. I'm like, yeah. So what we realize is that there are multiple reasons why transformations fail. And there's some commonalities there. I mean, of course, the sky's the limit because we're dealing with cultures and people and organizations, and there are so many different variances, nuances, permutations, and combinations out there. But basically, this is not an assessment tool. It's a way to break yourself out of your current trap you might be in when you find out your transformation is either not doing what you expect it to do, or it's just flat out failing, you're trying to hide it and figure out a way to fix it.
Trying to hide it. Okay. So Pete, you're in the same elevator as me and Mike. You just heard me ask Mike this question, and then you just heard his answer. And you're obviously his partner. So when I turn to look at you in that elevator and I go, is this guy freaking crazy? What would you say to me?
I would say yes, but not because of that answer.
Well played.
I mean, he's totally right. So this has really become like a community project to kind of look at how do organizations fail when they start rolling out Agile, and then sort of making a list of all of the different places where that could possibly happen and where it might happen for different reasons, and then starting to do some cross-referencing on that kind of stuff. So when people solve these problems, what does Kanban do? What does Scrum do? What does SAFe do? You can pick a different methodology. What does XP do? You take something like, if you don't collaborate on a regular basis, then things are going to start to fall apart. So you can do stand-up meetings. You can do mob programming. You can just have a collaborative workspace where you're all there and working or scheduling like regular working sessions to make sure that you're all doing these collaborative things. They're all things that we know that we need to do, but each of the different formats, each of the different schools, approaches, frameworks, or whatever, might have a different approach to how to do that. And so this was an effort to sort of go through and catalog all these different things and figure out where were the crossover points, and more importantly, where are the points where if you don't have this thing, like any version of this thing, you need to get a version of this thing. And so that was like really the start of it. So that's what we call it, the Library of Agile. So it's just this overview of all the different parts of Agile. And we found that there's quite a few parts. So there's about 4 main different focuses of area, and each one has about 20 different practices or problem areas inside of it. And then there's, who knows how many versions of practices that then solve those problems. So it just gives you a map.
I when I dug into the materials that you guys sent me, one of the things I was most intrigued by, and I think this is where not only do you differentiate yourself, but it actually makes so much logical sense that it's kind of like, well, duh, why didn't somebody come up with this sooner? Is the idea of composability, right? So these are all different pieces. They're all different Legos, and they all stack on top of one another. And a Lego by itself is worth nothing, except if you step on it barefoot. We've all done that. I don't even have kids, and I remember what that feels like. It's terrible, right? But with all these practices, these mindset, these things, you're supposed to stack them together. So when Mike, you made the remark, oh, well, we're doing half safe, half less with a half day of PI planning. It's kind of like the world's worst cocktail, but I would kind of, I would respond with, okay, so really, how is that working out? Because there is that concept of composability, right? And the way you to approach this is, all these little things are kind of tied together in ways you may not even see. So start stacking them with each other, and you're going to end up in probably a smarter place. The other approach you took, which I really, really loved, which we've had this conversation in some of the experiments, the Uprising is about around, the idea of choose your own agile adventure, right? For those of you that are younger and don't remember these books, for shame, these are books that were really big in the 80s, where you would get to a certain point and it would tell you, if you're going to go into the left cave, go to page 87. If you're going to go to the right cave, go to page 273. And you worked your way through the book, and more often than not, you hit a dead end, and you had to go back, and you would think to yourself, and this is where I think this concept comes in. You would think to yourself, okay, so where did I maybe go left where I should have went right? And along with composability, that mental model of, okay, let's play things backwards, get back to where we made that weird hook, and maybe go the other direction. That's a mental hurdle that I guarantee you a lot of people. And I'm curious to see what both of your experiences are, especially in leadership, like going back and saying, well, maybe I should have went right there. It's kind of a tough question to ask, right? Yourself, let alone of other people.
So in the Choose Your Agile Adventure, and I did love them as a kid, and we've come up with a lot of cute words and phrases like Safe has with it. I mean, what great marketing. We gotta start having our own marketing division on the things we have, because we also call it AMMI, which is Agile Mindset Mapping Index. You might think it's an assessment, but it's more than that. It's ever growing. It's publicly available. Now, I'll say that there's four, as Pete was bringing up, there's 4 different areas that it has, and each of them have like 20 practices, where it's 6 different categories, which kind of look like value streams and how value streams tend to flow. That you get the people involved, and you're going to do the design, you're going to do the planning, you're going to implement, you're going to verify, and then you're going to operate on it, right? So then you get in the value streams. All these are deep, and they're changing based on our real-time feedback that we're getting, where we're practicing this at real clients right now, and they're helping us grow it. And with that, there's this overall view that with all these great word choices, we're doing this a little bit differently. And we do have it in our upcoming book, like you mentioned. And the different part is that composability. Now you can say safe, hey, they got the Agility Health Radar with that company and comparative agility. And they kind of connect all their assessments in these agile radars that they have, radar chart spider diagrams, as they call it. And those are spreadsheets totally available too out there. Yet they're very focused on the world of safe and getting those competencies to get business agility. They're okay. They can have their purpose too. And I have used those for at least one implementation. Here we're bringing in other perspectives as well as safe perspective included in that. And so these perspectives are really self-paced, choosing your own adventure there, and having it where you can figure out where you go as your own team on taking these assessments and evaluating where you're missing things, because a lot of the problems out there is people don't know what to do. They don't know what they don't know. And they get caught in their own little way of thinking. I like to say it's like they box themselves into their own level of bias or frame of like, I'm helpless. Like the elephant that's a baby elephant, you put a stake in the ground and a chain on it. Elephant can't pull out, but once it's full grown, it could easily do it, but it's forced helplessness. That's how teams end up and products end up with programs. And we go up to the level of organizations, and we go global with impact. So those last 2 levels aren't totally available freely on the Library of Agile, but the others are. And it hits those challenges that people have where they feel like they're in forced helplessness, or they feel like they don't know what to do. here's a way to get you to a next level and feel like you're freed again.
You bring up a very interesting point with the idea of that choose your own adventure book and forced helplessness, in the sense that, there are times you get yourselves backed into a corner, right? Because if you think about every transformation we have all ever been a part of, every change initiative, forget even a transformation, every change initiative, when they don't go as well as we would have liked, there was always an inflection point. There was a point where it kind of turned. And very, very infrequently, and I'd be curious to hear what you two think, very infrequently do we stop and look back at that and say, hey, where did this steak start to really go bad? And we tried to resuscitate it, and then we all end up with E. coli. It's very hard for us to do that. And that, just the idea of using the language of choose your own adventure, it forces you to look back and see where you made some decisions, and not to say that they were wrong, they were unsuccessful. And that's that's one of the things, again, it keeps bouncing in my head. It's a very powerful conversation to even have with someone where you turn and you say, VP Pete, we're not really getting the value we thought we were going to get. Where do you think, let's take a beat, and where do you think we went a little off? Where do we go wrong? And just that concept, that conversation, I mean, even if it goes terribly and VP Pete wants to fire me, which honestly probably does happen more than we'd like to admit, it's still a good conversation to have.
I think one of the things is that it's not all compounded together. So that's one of the things that I've seen is people like this, that learned helplessness kind of thing. Is folks get into an Agile transformation, they're like, oh, this isn't working. Or I've been to places where they're like, oh, Agile just doesn't work for us. And so one, it was like kind of looking at it from a scientific perspective, across multiple different versions of it, chatting with a bunch of different people. Have you had this problem? Have you had that problem? What did you do? How did you solve it? And starting to realize that it wasn't that Agile didn't work. It wasn't that the entire system didn't work. They actually had a lot of pieces that were working really well. And once I was able to see that and piece it together and have these categories and say, okay, well, let's look through these things. So these pieces of your system are going great, but you don't have this piece. And without this, these other three pieces are useless. So now we need to figure out, okay, so what are you going to do for this? Like, I don't care which version you do, but you need to have a solution for this. Like one of the biggest popular ones is being able to look at the big picture. So, there's a section in here under design that has to do with visualizing your work and looking at it sort of from end to end. And I've run into many organizations over the years where they have the systems in place, they're doing the collaboration, they've got the retros, they got a good team going, they're working with their product owners, but they're working with their product owners on just the thing they're looking at right now. And so they're not looking at how the entire system fits together. And so the architects can't plan out and figure out what needs to be done. They're discovering problems late in the process that eventually is going to cause them problems. And they often attribute it to emergent design. And they're like, oh, well, the design just going to merge as we go along. But there's certain things you can figure out upfront right away.
Right.
But we don't want to do big upfront design either. But there's a bunch of exercises where you just visualize it, put it together, string it together. And I can take the same team, the same people, have them visualize their work. And now with the exact same processes, they're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know why the product owner is asking me to do this and why that has to go there. And the architect's like, oh, so you want me to do this in 6 months, so I better have something right here now that we're building it. And then all the pieces start to fall into place, and they start clicking, and they start really being able to do something effective.
And that scenario, Pete, sounds to me like one that most coaches see, most Scrum Masters see day in and day out, where we fall, and this is a human thing, right? We fall in love with this. And to give a little bit of background, Pete and Mike shared with me a Miro board that they worked on to visualize this solution. And one of the things that jumped off the page to me is something that I know we all do. We focus a lot on solutions, and we don't take the minute or the breath to understand what the actual problem is. If we just do Scrum, we will be okay. If we just do Scrum better, we will be okay. And then again, you're building on sand, and that whole idea of, which I thought you gentlemen called out very elegantly, talk about the problem and unpack that. To your point, okay, so you have these three things, but they're not really fitting together. So what's the thing that's missing? Where's the problem? Oh, the problem is, we have a dependency way over here, which is completely unresolved. And that's just completely screwing any chance we have at being successful. I really thought that was a brilliant call out, because, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when your wife really wants that convertible C6 Corvette, that's what she really wants, even though when they chop the top off it, it's going to be a death trap with no structural integrity. But you got to do what you got to do. So that and I'm going to throw it back to you, Mike. You guys talked about some of the reasons transformation fail. That was one of them. One of the other ones you talked about is the concept, which you could go with. I'd like you to go in a little bit. The idea of sphere of influence and span of control, and how when we fail to grasp something, that we think things are in one place, but it's in somewhere else. And it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, that feeling of helplessness. Can we talk a little bit about that and how we kind of we shoot our own transformations in the foot because of that, missing those two?
Yeah, that's an awesome one. To go over that sphere of influence and back to that force helplessness, because it has a lot to do, and it really comes down to me, to psychological safety. That what happens is people get into their organization a level of things that they think, I can't go beyond this. And I think it was Gerald Weinstein who had said, and popularized in the Agile community, about you don't know how far you can push the envelope until you try. And it's all about getting teams to stop thinking that, well, I can't bring in security early because they're too busy. I'm doing a lot of work in our US government right now, and it's pretty amazing, impressive work. And I'm having this little discussion with one of my non-government workers, and he says, government work can't be fun if you're trying to do Agile. And I beg to differ, because this is a lot of fun here. And one of the things that makes it fun is that you can open their eyes to doing what we call a 40 operate in a day. That's a goal that they have, where they can openly say everything gets done. Shifting security left, building testing in, all those great things. How do you get them to start thinking that way? Well, first, you got to make sure they feel safe about bringing it up, because something usually happened where they brought up an idea and then it got pushed back on or they got slapped on the hand. They got negative feedback from maybe their own teammates.
Yep. Dinged. They got dinged. Yeah.
They got dinged. And then they start having that behavior like, I shouldn't ask that. That's the way it is here. Can't change it. And those words just are the opposite of the positive words we're talking about. Is we don't do it that way here. Just that one is like a challenge for me. I'm ready to just duke it out. Oh yeah, let's see if you're right.
right.
So
it's fighting words.
It's fighting words. I'm Irish, so I got a little bit. I'll put in some Irish whiskey in me and put up my dukes. And I'm a skinny, tall guy, but I when it comes to that sort of thing, you can ask my wife. I can be on the debate club anytime about, oh yeah, I think we can. There's a will, there's a way. So in any event, taking that approach with building psychological safety is the first thing. And that's where it isn't exactly built in necessarily into Library Agile, but you can feel it in there when you go through that. That psychological safety, those words are definitely used. You can see how that's the starting point. And that allows you to choose your own adventure, so you don't end up getting caught into being eaten by piranha in the pool in that cave that you went on the left cave when you should have done the right. And even if you do, you can see the piranha before you go in and say, okay, we want to get out of there because we just used this tool, I'll call it, this system to help us get ourselves out of that bad situation.
So I'd like to, we've talked a lot about the theory about where this idea came from and how you guys put it together. We kind of went really down the rabbit hole, which was kind of fun, which, by the way, Mike, if you're doing a lot of security work, we have an upcoming episode where we're talking about better value, sooner, safer, happier. The chapter on security, I can't believe how much I enjoyed that chapter. Like the whole InfoSec, like let's be real here. Everybody's listening. It's kind of unsexy, right? But I walked away from that book thinking that was probably the best chapter of that book. And I never, ever thought I would say that in my life. Now I'm going to proceed to set myself on fire because I definitely lost a bet with somebody about risk and InfoSec and all that. But what I'd like to talk about, guys, can we talk about a little bit more about the tool and some usage scenarios? So someone's listening to the show, they've got their curiosity piqued, and now they want to go in and kind of start poking around. What are some of the suggestions you would make to like almost them choosing their own adventure, where if you find yourself here, start with this, or if you find yourself here, start with this, but beware of that. What do you think, Pete? I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, we've gone through various different versions of this and tried out a bunch of different things. And one of the things that we're finding that works really well is to kind of go through and think about four key kind of areas. And so we've added a new section to the website now that Start Your Own Adventure. And so it kind of walks people through that process. And so the first step is focusing on what are some problems I'm trying to solve. Because if you're trying to make an agile transformation happen and you need to motivate the people to make that actual change, like it's hard to make a change. And it requires people to do something different. If they don't understand why they're doing it, they're not going to want to do it. And they may just not do it at all, or they may tell you they're going to do it and not actually do it. So we're finding that it's really core to understand that you have, like, to make a change, you got to make something better for them. So I find out what's not better for them, find out what's not good for them right now. What could you solve using Agile? Identify those things that are most important, that are these biggest problems, and go in and tackle that. And so you can kind of walk through this process. And then we start looking at, collaboration points. So the second step there is, like, we don't really get into roles because roles are very different from the different Agile spectrums and the different systems that are out there. But everybody comes together at some point. That's the point of Agile. We come together and deal with people-related issues, human resources kind of issues. We come together and we design together. We come together and we plan together. We build together. We do operations together. We do testing and all these different things. So we actually have like 6 different categories that we've been able to sort of conceptually break everything down. And so looking at, where does your problem exist in the organization? Is it a design problem, or is it an execution problem? Is it an operations problem, or is it a people problem? And then knowing from there where you need to go, and then looking at, is this something that's just about my small little team? And so this again takes us back to sort of those spheres of influence. Is this a problem between my team and somebody else's team? Is this across the entire organization? We're all having this problem. And then what do I have influence on? What are the things that I can actually change versus what are the things that I need other people to participate in to be able to change? Makes a big difference and a big deal. And so there's different strategies here. Plus there's things that sort of impact, every organization that's out there. And that's our sort of last section there, sort of, global impact. And so that's kind of like where we find a lot of the practices that are really kind of pushing Agile forward. So, but you don't need to do all of that at once, but find a problem, figure out where that problem is, what point of collaboration is it in, and what can you actually do about it, and keep it isolated to the things that you actually have control over. And then just fix one problem. And then find the next problem, pick the next most important thing, track it down, then fix that thing, then find the next. I find that people want to do too much. It's like you come in and you try to do these classes, or 2-day classes, and they go through all these different things that you need to do. And then the teams maybe apply some of it, but maybe not all of it, and then gradually, and then they forget about certain things, and they're trying to do too much at once. So I'm a big fan of like, pick 1 or 2 things and just change 1 or 2 things that concretely you want to see a change. You want to see a different behavior when you're done. You want to have had a problem and that problem have gone away, and then find another problem and make that problem go away, and find another problem, make that problem go away. And that's the best way to get into any of these things.
It's eating the elephant one bite at a time, right? And
yeah.
Jumping off that, Mike, one of the things that Pete brought up, which he said a couple of times, is figuring out the problem that you want to solve. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. It has been my experience that a lot of companies, they get so excited and they want to start. They want to do something. Like Pete was just saying, we want to solve everything, right? We're going to do org structure, we're going to do reporting, and we're going to get rid of the middleware. We're going to, break out QA into all the teams. But I think the first step is knowing where you are before you actually try and take that first step. And would you concur? Would you agree that sometimes some of the places that we as practitioners have found ourselves painted into those corners, it's because we didn't take the arguably, right, and maybe necessarily that slow burn in to figure out where do we actually sit before we take that leap off the ledge? Would you concur that you've seen a lot of that where we just want to, I hate to crap on safe because I do think there's a lot of good there, but there are companies which just have been sold a bill of goods. Hey, here's the big picture, go do this. And they want to go do it, but they never stop to ask, oh, what's the Dr. Malcolm line from Jurassic Park? I can't believe I'm going to quote this movie. You spend so much time trying to figure out if you could that you never stop to figure out if you should. I think that I just butchered Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum, if you're listening, I'm sorry. But what do you think, Mike? Do you think how important is the concept of knowing where you're starting from before you actually take that leap?
I concur, and I'm going to raise that with it's a vital and full agreement, 100%. So with that said, there's the old quote, which I know some circles find it overused, and that's okay. Meet them where they are, which means getting an understanding of what the current state is. And, hey, from the book of Lisa Atkins with Coaching Agile Teams, she would say, take it to the team. Now, I found teams that you take it to the team on any problem you have. Is this a problem for you? What do you think about? They often don't know. Matter of fact, I was reading on LinkedIn, the comic Agile, and they had this funny little thing, the Scrum Master going with the team saying, I'm going to facilitate this meeting to help you out with your problems. Are you excited about it? And they say, sorry, why don't you facilitate that over there? We got a feature of the build right now. And that's what we run into a lot as coaches. All right. I've been all roles, by the way, and Pete has too. We've been all over the place. So we know how it feels on the other side. I wrote an text-based adventure game as a developer on my team. So that was the beginning. I was like Zork. But in any event, I know how it feels to be there. And sometimes you just want to get stuff done. And so it's really hard to get teams, if you're a coach, always trying to push new stuff, and they get change fatigue. And so it's better to go to them and help get them time and space, clear it out, because a lot of times the problems are they're doing too much communication in the wrong way. That Agile helps bring in the communication at the right levels, the right amount, at the right time. And then you got to go a little farther with that to make sure they aren't in wasteful meetings, wasteful time where they always feel like they're under the gun, tyranny of that urgent happening where I got to get this done. I got to get this done. You got to clear out some time, which means leadership support to have that happen. And then you can say, all right, let's go through the Library of Agile, whatever tool you want to use there. We like the Library of Agile because of the effectiveness we've seen of it. I've used it for that reason. And then they start coming and building their own buy-in to it because they co-created it. And they have the time so they don't feel like they're going to end up getting under a chopping block because they didn't meet their sprint goal or hit their velocity they're supposed to, or whatever it is they're being measured by. So that's really important to get there, and understanding where they are first from their eyes rather than your own is always the best way to start.
So you brought up the idea of, jumping right in and using the right words, and agile, we come in and we start throwing all these words around at people. And it's the easiest way to lose people is to start blasting them with like garbage terms, right? Use nomenclature. When you guys sent me some of the notes to prep for the show, one of the things my spider sense perked up at is you have actual concrete examples of using this stuff where you used it, but you didn't specifically say, hey, we are using X, which I'm a big fan of, right? If you could sneak it in, Backdoor Agile is my screen name. If you could sneak it in that way, it makes sense. And you had two examples, one of a government agency, one of a Fortune 50 finance company, where you introduced these things. You didn't specifically say we are going to do X. You just used it as a lever to get the results you want. And I think the results speak for themselves. I remember reading that the government example, you ended up with your own community of practice. You were using all these mind mapping techniques and these mindset exercises, these assessments, without even saying you were actually doing it. And then conversely, I think the other example, which I think came from Pete, knowing Pete, where you guys were doing, it was a financial company where you introduced the change and then you started mapping the change to the pre-existing nomenclature and terminologies that were already there, right? So like, Mike, you were just talking about meeting people where they're at. And again, sometimes we get too excited with that shiny hammer that we want to hit everything with, where there is something to be said about just introducing it and sneaking it into being part of the parlance, sneaking it into the behavior without actually putting a name on it. Because as soon as you put a name on it, that I think you both would agree that anybody kicks up and it's no, we can't do Agile like pizza. It doesn't work here. And then you're kind of just left there shaking your head like, do I really want to have this conversation? How much coffee have I had? How much coffee I had? Do I want to have this conversation? So the reason I bring that up is you guys have real life examples of using this stuff where it's actually fruitful and getting you the results you want without actually putting the, I'm like Mad Dog Dougherty and I'll paint your Agile for $49.95. You didn't have to put that badge on it, which I think is, that's a very important success story to me, at least when I was reading that.
Yeah, don't tell anybody, just your thousands of listeners. We have this thing we call Secret AMMI. And it's
man. Sorry, I had to do that.
Oh, it's terrible. Dad jokes. Here we go.
I wish that somebody was a member of the community that created a logo for us, a secret AMMI. And it's this process that you were just describing of that when you don't have to advertise it and it works anywhere. And so it's really about looking at the situation that you're in and breaking it down and figuring out how to solve what you're doing. And so like take that big finance, the Fortune 50 finance company. So they had one of the big consultants. I think we probably all know, what that which consultant that probably was. Yep. Yeah, one of the big ones there. And they had figured out their this method of working, let's say it that way, that they wanted to roll out. And there was nothing wrong with it. I looked at this listing of things that they wanted, and it was like standard DevOps practices. It was collaborative planning, basically the equivalent of PI planning. They weren't doing SAFe. They weren't doing scaled Agile, but they needed some aspect of this. They needed some engineering practices rolled into all this kind of stuff. And they were looking at, like, well, we already had our own plans. And then here comes in this consulting company and they want us to be able to do all of these things. And so what, are we supposed to just scrap all the stuff that we were working on and start working on their thing? And I was like, no, let me show you this thing. So we're going to create a cross track here. So we put up all the AMMI selections and we took all the stuff they had been working on. We mapped it to the different AMMI categories. Then we took the one that was being, handed to us to implement and mapped those as well. And now we had a crosswalk. And so every time they asked us for this practice, I just crosswalked over to the practice they were already doing that solved it and then reported it back. And so for everything that they asked us to do, we could go and look and say, hey, we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. This is the data we need to collect. And they didn't have to change anything in the teams. They didn't have to change the words that they were using. They didn't have to change the processes, but they could still, contribute and show to the upper management that they were listening, they were paying attention, and that they were doing what the upper management wanted them to do and wanted them to implement. And we actually went through this thing. We did the whole AMMI process and we did the prioritization of problems and we walked through it. And we actually did a quick whiz GIF on it. And so they gave us this listing of all these things that needed to be done. It was like, okay, when do you need to have them done? We're like, well, we figured it's probably going to be over the next, 6 months to a year. I'm like, okay, great, perfect. So we just said, what is the most important thing that the team needs to get done? What's the problem they're dealing with right now? What do you want to roll out right now? And we solved that. We put that together. We added in a report, and that became part of our monthly report. And we showed them how, hey, we're working on this category that you asked us to switch to improve. We're improving it by doing these activities over here. And we not only became the team within the organization that was rolling out the organizational-wide program the fastest, but we were having such a great impact that they actually reached out to us and said, hey, can you come show the rest of the teams how you implemented, our program and what we were doing? And so that was like, great, sort of reinforcing kind of, thing to show that we actually were not only solving our problems, but solving their problems as well. We were helping them to do an agile transformation, even though the people on the ground disagreed with how that approach was upfront. But really, they didn't disagree. It just all came down to terminology. And we wanted to be able to choose our own agile adventure. So we secret in the background did an AMMI transformation with the crosswalks, with everything, and everybody was happy. The teams were happy on the ground. The leadership was happy. And they got to pick their own path, and they were able to show the organizations that it is possible to roll this stuff out. And there is a good, sort of approach that is also good for the teams. Everybody wins.
And it sounds to me, Pete, that even inadvertently you solve for one of the problems that I guarantee you every single one of us has seen in every single engagement we've ever had. It's the ability to report on how are things going in an intelligent, demonstrable way where everybody is speaking the same language. And by listing what they did and crosswalking it to the secret AMMI, and then having the ability to report out on what you're actually working on tied to something that's in English that everyone can understand, that's one of the biggest problems we all face, right? No matter what role you're filling in an org, it's how do I show people that I'm doing a good job? And the other thing is how can I tell my coaches are worthwhile? We have another episode coming out on that, so I'm not going to bury that lead. But that's the other problem, right? Is how do I report out on this stuff? And you without purpose, backed yourself into that. Backed yourself into answering that question to be able to say, here's the things that I'm working on, here's where it's trending, and here's what's up next.
Well, it wasn't accidental. I'm sure Michael's been in the same situation. I've been asked that question, gone through a transformation, and had the executives walk down and say, all right, So how do I know that my teams are better? And, we're like, well, we should see an increase in velocity. We should be getting more stories done. And like, okay, yeah. So what does that mean? And then it's like, okay, well, then that should result in you be able to getting features out the door. Okay, great. And then you realize that what they're really asking is, and I had a couple cases that it's usually a script that they're living by that they are not telling us, which is, I've got budget cuts coming up. The market doesn't look great. I don't want to fire people, but I'm going to have to, and I need to turn things around. And Agile's supposed to help us with that, but it's if you have those sort of expectations that you've got a budget and that you're working on a budget, and now we're just trying to improve our flows. We're trying to, there's all these metrics that we have inside of Agile that mean something, but they have to all come together in order to move the financial sheet and determine whether or not somebody gets fired, in 3 months or not. And putting all those pieces together, I had to show that your teams need to make a couple of these changes in order to enable them to make the other changes that you're going to see the effects of. And so, yeah, you're not going to see a lot coming out in these first, 3 months or 6 months, but then you're going to start to see the return on it. And with one company I was doing with, I was able to show that yeah, we made these changes. You didn't see this happening, but now they learned these techniques, and now they're able to actually think about the customer, and they're actually able to be customer focused, and they're actually able to do some customer discovery. And so at the 6 month point, getting into the 9 months and into the year-long point, the teams that had gone through that transformation were now overshooting their budget number. They were bringing in twice as much revenue, 3 times, and one team was bringing in 4 times as much revenue. And so they didn't have to do the cuts. And so I was able to tie it back and forth together and say, in order to get there, you have to have these things in place, because if you don't have these things will fall apart. And so that's why we're doing this now. And so tracking all of that stuff and putting it together and showing what's the measure in Agile transformation, that they actually got better, that they actually tried some things and they did, all right, well, which things? And that that really is where the AMMI comes into place, and showing, all right, these are the things that need to be improved, and the team has to know in order to be able to drive your numbers. So track them on whether or not they actually do this thing. I don't care which technique they use, but make sure they make a change. They're not doing it now. When we're done, they are doing it, and now they're ready to help you with the bottom line.
It's almost as if I hate to use the term broken windows policing, right? Because it has some negative connotation, but the idea of concentrating, to your point, Pete, on that one little thing, right? Let's start here with this one thing, and let's build on that one thing. And like you said, you may not see it in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but what you're doing is you're planting seeds that very quickly do end up germinating. And that idea of just starting with those one little things and moving from there and getting to the point where you can prove that it's a lot like to where you can prove that, yeah, I don't need to lay anybody off. Actually, I need to hire people, because, there's Mike, I'm going to ask you there conceptually, and in your experience, I have the hypothesis that in these transformations, a lot like what Pete was saying, there's always 2 or 3 low hanging fruit. I hate to use that term, but there's 2 or 3 little things that if you kind of just let the air a little bit out of that balloon, you'll find things kind of go nuts, right? And I think that one of the things that we struggle with, and one of the things that this mindset mapping index can help, is find those little things. Because when you're looking at a system, you're looking at, companies of 20, 30, 40, 100,000 people. It's quite difficult to find that one little, oh, what does this button do? And you hit the button and everything goes the way it's supposed to. Would you agree, Mike, that that's one of the benefits of this tool, is going to help you find those little things that can make a big difference?
Absolutely. I consider it like treasure hunting for those. Some people have a knack for finding them. I find out I have a knack for having other people expose them to me, and then I just need to take action. It could be as simple as, I remember working on improving the DevOps for a financial institution that has a card everybody would know. And they said, we don't right now check in our code daily. And then everyone else go, what? Why aren't we checking in our code daily for one of their products they have? Just haven't gotten around it. We'll get to it soon. It's like, let's do it. And they implemented it. And I heard back a couple months later that the quality of the code, the amount of bugs had gone down, their throughput gone down, just because they started checking in code daily. one little thing that they've been running with this particular product for years and years and years, probably a decade now plus, and they just hadn't done it. So that's one example of a change. Now it could be bigger changes that take more effort. One that I usually like to see is team restructuring if it's needed, in that a lot of teams are restructured. Like I said, 30 people in a team. There was a contract that allowed that. Basically, it was an offshore provider, and they had it where if we didn't meet our velocity, we'll add more people. And so a traditional agile team, 7 plus or minus 2, went to be 12, 15, 20, 30, because the client was like, hey,
guys, this Fibonacci number is going the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. Yeah. We got to be going down. This is going up. Yeah.
And we know how that turns out. It turns out where actually the result is the opposite. The output, it comes out lower, and the outcome might not be existent at all. Yeah, they just start closing in, the lines of communication just go multiply exponentially, and it looks worse than the Loki show on Disney Plus, with all the timeline splitting going on. Instead of team splitting of all these things happening, nobody can keep track of it anymore.
I think you just came up with a new idea, Mike. You do, the multiverse team topology model. There's something there. Somebody will buy that t-shirt. Somebody will buy that. So, gentlemen, we're quickly running out of time. I do want to give one final question to both of you, and it's if people want to get more information, if they want to find out more, if they want to engage with the two of you, Pete, where do they go to find you?
You can go to the libraryofagile.org. You can also look for the AMMI, the AMMI community of practice. So we have a meetup, and we meet about once a month on Wednesdays, like it's the second Wednesday of the month. And it's a great place to just be able to talk with other people who get it, who understand what's going on, and share ideas back and forth. So go check out the libraryofagile.org, go on Meetup and search for the AMMI community of practice. You'll find those things. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and ask me questions and send me stuff. So I think my shorthand is Pete OK. But if you look for Pete Oliver-Krueger, pull up the note, I'm the only one on LinkedIn that has the last name of Oliver-Krueger. So it's nice and easy to find me there.
And unlike me, you have actual vowels in your name, so it's a lot easier to find. You just smash a bunch of keys in the keyboard. What were you gonna say, Mike?
And just to throw in a potential challenge to anyone out there, if you have even an inkling of interest, when you go to the Library of Agile, go through it at the team or the product level. Pick something that you know is a problem, or you're aware is a problem going on at your product level or your team level, and just run with it. See what happens. See how it turns out. Give it a try. Give it a whirl. We want you to use it. Nothing more than that. And then give us feedback on anything you see on improving it one way or the other. It didn't really work for this reason, or it did work for that reason. We'd love to have any feedback at all during whatever you can. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can give feedback on Library of Agile, wherever you can find us.
Perfect. So on behalf of all of our listeners, Mike and Pete, I want to thank you both for taking time out of your busy Christmas week to sit down and chat with us. On behalf of Pete, Mike, and myself, I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in once again. Just as a reminder, if you like what you heard, we have a very vibrant Discord server. I think we just hit our 400th registered user. They've had a lot of conversation going on, which is kind of wild because it's a Christmas break. You'd think it would be slow, and yet we got people yelling at each other about frameworks and SAFe and BDD oh my. So please find us on Discord. I'll put a link in the show notes. Shout out to Chris at Machine Man Records for providing our outro music by the artist Krebs, free of charge. If you like ministry, if you like industrial stuff, please give them a check. And last but not least, we are committed to always being free. However, we do have a Patreon. So if you like what you heard and you want to contribute a couple bucks to offset hosting and production, feel free to sign up. You will definitely get a surprise in the mail from me. We do have quite a few stickers and baubles and geeky stuff out there. So if that's what you're into, please feel free to sign up. So once again, I want to thank Pete and Mike for taking the time today. And until next episode, this is the Agile Uprising podcast signing out.